y'all, howdy. Welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandra Broadwell, and today I'm recording from the podcast room in the Missoula Public Library. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, always check out the resources at your local public library. This one is one of the best public libraries I've ever been to, but it's encouraging me to check out more public libraries as we travel around the country. Long story short, I'm here to talk to you guys about all of the books that I read in May, and May had some bangers. To kick off the month of May, I read The Words of Radiance, which is book 2 in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. By the time I finished The Words of Radiance, I've decided that the Stormlight Archive is my personality now, and I'm not sad about it. I was so enthralled reading this book. There were so many good moments, like just thinking back on this book, which now seems like a long time ago because I've read like 7 other books since then. But I think of like the last scene between Adeline and Sadeas, and I'm just like, oh my God, that was so crazy. Or like there was this cool scene where like Kaladin and Shallan are like in the chasms together. I loved that whole sequence. And the epilogue, like the character reveal that happened in the epilogue of this book, just like had me on the edge of my seat. Shallan's story throughout this entire book, I think, got a lot more interesting than it was in the first book because she's really starting to like come into her own and like learn more about her magic. And she was also like trying to infiltrate this society of people called Ghost Bloods who are like trying to learn some significant secrets, and she was kind of being like undercover. This book just had so much. It really like took everything that the first book had going on and just like really launched the characters forward, I think, a lot in this one. And I just absolutely ate it up. There was like a really cool duel between Adeline and, I won't reveal, I don't want to like, no spoilers, right? But oh my gosh, like if you've read it, you know. This book had it all. And yeah, I really just like, as soon as I finished it, I started messaging like all of my friends I knew who have read the Stormlight Archive, and I was like, oh my God, I have to talk to someone about this book. It was so awesome. So yeah, I'm trying to space out this series because I want it to still be really fresh when book 5 comes out in December. And so I'm reading one of these books every other month. So I won't pick up book 3 until July, but it'll be the very first thing I pick up in July, believe me. Yeah, so very excited about the Stormlight Archive, and I am so happy that this series exists. It is possibly going to be like my new favorite series of all time, so no one's surprised. Okay, then after The Words of Radiance, I went ahead and picked up another book 2 of a epic fantasy series, and that was The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri. This is book 2 of The Burning Kingdoms, which started with The Jasmine Throne. I read The Jasmine Throne around this time last year, and I think because of that, it took me like the first 20% of the book, I think, to really get back into the story because there's a lot of characters and I was just having a hard time kind of remembering like who was who. But then after that 20% mark, I like binged the rest of this book. There was so much happening. There were battles, there were betrayals, there was angst. I mean, like characters were making sacrifices that were so heart-wrenching. And there was like old gods coming back that like threw a wrench in everything. I think this second book, The Oleander Sword, is better than The Jasmine Throne. And I loved The Jasmine Throne. So I am super duper stoked for The Lotus Empire book 3 to come out, I think towards the end of this year. I will definitely be like putting in my library hold on that like right away because yeah, this series has turned out so great. And we still follow our main 3 characters from the first book, which are the Empress's sister, a kind of maidservant turned priestess, and a governor's wife also turned priestess. I love the differences between all of these characters. They're so unique. They're so powerful. Yeah, just all of them had really incredible arcs in this book that I was just like so enthralled with. So highly, highly recommend that you pick up the Burning Kingdoms trilogy if you have not already. Oh, my third book was also a book number 2 in a series. I didn't realize I started my month with like 3 sequels in a row, but this was When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, which is book 2 of the Singing Hills cycle, and I actually caught up on the entire Singing Hills cycle this month, so you'll hear about several more of these. But When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain is about Cleric Chi, who is the main character in all of these books. And I would say they all are pretty much standalones at this point. I don't know that they really it really matters that you read them in chronological order, but I always read everything in chronological order. But When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain is basically Cleric Chi is traveling. Their whole purpose as a cleric is basically to like travel around to lots of different places and collect stories for the archives at their abbey. And they're like basically historians. In this one, Chi is traveling. They have a guide or like an escort, and they're riding on a mammoth, which is really cool. And on the road, they get attacked by some tigers, and this is like a fable type story, and the tigers are actually women. They end up telling stories to the tigers to try and get out of them, like letting them go, like in exchange for, I'll tell you a really great story. So this, I think, is the most fable-esque of the whole series, even though I think all of them are very much like fables. So this was a really fun one. And then I moved on to book number 3. Again, these are, the Singing Hills cycle are all novellas, so they're like 100, 130 pages, somewhere in that range. They're all very, very short, and they're very easy reads. The third one is Into the Riverlands, and this, I think, is my least favorite of the 5 that have been published so far, just because it felt a little less connected, I think, from Cleric Chi, even though they were there the whole time. It was really focusing more on the stories of these other characters that they were traveling with, and each of those people had like multiple different names and multiple different ways like throughout the story, which I found a little bit confusing, and I just wasn't as engaged. It was still a good story. It was really, I think the message of this one was a lot about like the stories we tell other people about ourselves and how no person can ever really know like the whole you. They could only ever know a piece of you that you share. Then I read a book that I actually did remember to bring with me, which is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This is the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty, and I loved this so much. I actually, after the first like initial 20% or 1/3, I was reading like 200 pages a day, and I like flew through this in just a short amount of time. This follows a young man named Kunigaru who, he starts off the story as kind of like a mischievous young person, and then when we next see him, he's maybe in his like early 20s, and he is a gangster, but with a heart of gold. Really lazy and has kind of turned to gangsterdom just because he doesn't really feel like he wants a real job. He hasn't found his calling, but he has this like really great friend group that he really loves and relies on, and they all have very different kind of roles within the friend group. And he meets a young woman that he falls in love with, and really this story spans quite a long amount of time, and it follows a lot of different characters, but Kunigaru is the main character that we keep coming back to, and a lot of the other characters that we meet we're meeting because of the ways that they interact with his life. The overall plot of the story is about this island kingdom called Dara. It was previously 7 different kingdoms, or 7 different states, and they are currently under the rule of an emperor who consolidated all these states and took power of the entire country himself. Nobody really likes this emperor, and there is seeds of rebellion popping up kind of all over the empire right now to rise up against this emperor. And so this is about how Kunigaru gets involved with the rebellion and all of the fallout, and really about like the character relationships that happen in here, of like the friendships, the love, the like betrayals, and how relationships change over time, and how that affects how these historic events play out. So really it felt like this whole book was like a setup for the books to come. I have a feeling that the next books in the series are going to be even more epic. But I absolutely ate this up. And I actually did also start the second book in the series this month, but I am still reading that. So the second book is called The Wall of Storms. I started that after the last book I'm going to talk about today, and I'm currently about 30% of the way through that. So that'll definitely be the first book that I finish in June, but I won't talk about that for now because I haven't finished it yet. But yeah, loving the Dandelion Dynasty so far. Then I continued on with the Singing Hills cycle. The fourth book is called Mammoth at the Gates, and this one is Cleric Chi returning to the Singing Hills Abbey for the first time in several years. And it's all about like homecoming and what it means when you come home after a long time and home is different than you remember. Also like how you as a person are different and how that affects like how you feel about your home. In addition to that, it's about grief because a person that she was very close to has passed away since they were gone. And so, of course, that also makes home feel very different. On top of that, the person that she was close to that has recently passed away, their family members have come to the Abbey to try and demand the body of their family member back so that they can do their burial in their like traditional family way. But once a person is a cleric, they kind of renounce all of their family ways and commit to doing all the rites of funerals and stuff the way that any cleric at the Abbey would. And so it is kind of a contentious story between Chi trying to like find this balance between like honoring his family and their wishes, but also like honoring this person that they were close to, this other cleric's wishes in their duties as a cleric. So really liked that. And I thought this one was really sweet and definitely gave a like more insight into what their upbringing was like, showed some of their childhood friends, which was very cool. And also we got to see a lot more of the, I think they're called Nixons. They're the talking birds that each cleric is assigned, and you get to see like where they roost and see the dynamics between all the different birds, which was also very, very cool. So this one was definitely like one of the top ones in the series so far. And then I wrapped up this series to date with the new release that just came out, The Brides of High Hill, which is book 5 of the Singing Hills cycle. I can't remember exactly how many are planned in the series, if it's like 8 or 10, but it's definitely not done yet. So I'm very glad about that because this has turned into a bit of a comfort read series for me. The Brides of High Hill has a bit of a horror undertone. It like has some like pretty classic horror tropes, which I don't want to reveal because that would give away the whole thing. And again, these are very, very short stories. But I loved this one. I was eating up the horror vibes that were happening. And yeah, I don't really want to say anything about it because I feel like it'll give it away. But I gave this one 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed the 5th one. And then the last book that I completed was a nonfiction book, which I just picked up at Powell City of Books last month, and that is Writing Monsters by Philip Athens, How to Craft Believably Terrifying Creatures to Enhance Your Horror, Fantasy, and Science Fiction. Again, I picked this up because it has like a cool D&D looking monster on the front. I am writing a fantasy novel and I just thought this would be a really fun read. It was a fun read, I won't deny that. I ended up giving it around 3 stars, maybe 3.5, just because I felt like it was really a lot more basic or like surface level than I was expecting. My favorite parts about it were definitely like all the examples that were given from pop culture and media of like monsters that we have all known and seen. And I did like all the different references to those sorts of things. I guess what I didn't like was that there was like an over-reliance on using examples from H.P. Lovecraft. Like this author is definitely a Lovecraft fan in like a big way. And then also the author himself just gave some opinions which made this book feel really dated. I think this came out in like maybe 2013 or 2014. And so he said, you know, there was like a chapter on vampires or something. And he said like, oh, vampires are so overdone right now, blah, blah, blah. And he's obviously talking about like Twilight and stuff. And I was just like, okay, but like that really like, it really just dated the book. And yeah, so he just had like a few like one-off opinions like that where I was like, why is this relevant? Even if something is overdone, like when someone does it well, everyone still loves it. So I didn't really appreciate his commentary in those few instances. But otherwise, yeah, I would definitely recommend this to beginner writers. I think it was a great kind of starting point, and the whole book is based around, right at the beginning, they have a monster creation form that you can fill out, and It has a lot of different questions for you to answer. And so I think getting you to think about all of those different things is definitely helpful. So I think this will still be a good reference to have on my shelves, just to make sure I'm covering all the bases. And then the structure of the book is kind of like based off of the different questions on the monster creation form. So yeah, I even think this could be fun if you're like a DM for Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, and you want to homebrew some stuff. This could be a good thing. Overall good, but just good, not great. So that was the last book that I finished in May. Like I said, I'm about 30% of the way through The Wall of Storms, which is book 2 of the Dandelion Dynasty, so you'll definitely be getting my review for that during my June wrap-up. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them, and if not, what was your favorite book that you read in the month of May. Thanks so much for tuning in and hanging out with me for a little bit today. As always, please be kind, read books, and hit the subscribe button below for more bookish content to come. I'll see you again soon.